how you make copper wire, don't you? You get Thorpe and Turley fighting over a penny. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the Finance and Audit Committee meeting to order. And I'd like to first recognize that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk this morning will be Ms. Skye Snellgrove. Good morning, Ms. Snellgrove. Today's Finance and Audit Committee meeting will be held in accordance with the Community Charter, Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272, and Ministerial Order number M192, governing open meetings during a state of emergency, and the Provincial Health Officer Order regarding gatherings and events. Therefore, members of the public are required to observe meetings virtually and not attend in person, and question period will be suspended throughout the duration of the Provincial Health Order in effect. The first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items. I understand we have none. The next, a motion for approval of the agenda. Moved Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Bonner. All those in favour? Any contrary? None. Thank you. A motion for adoption of the minutes is circulated. Moved Councillor Hemmens, seconded Councillor Thorpe. All those in favour? Any opposed? No. Motion carries. And presentations, Mr. Smythe. The CEO and President of our local Chamber of Commerce is going to give us a presentation regarding city budget and upcoming municipal tax rates. Mr. Smythe, always nice to see you, bright and early in the morning. Welcome.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Thanks very much for your time today. It's a bit of a weird environment, and the first time that I've spoken to Council virtually. So I trust I will just go ahead and do my piece and let you interrupt me if there are any questions in the middle of this thing, or wait for questions at the end. So I am indeed here to speak on the city budget and upcoming municipal tax rates. In 2020, Council and staff undertook the municipal budget process as part of its ongoing planning and management of municipal financial requirements. Planning and management of the city's financial resources is obviously a continual process with a 5-year financial plan that's constantly, constantly being updated to guide decision-making and policy development.
Mr. Smythe, could you just stop for a second? We've got some sort of strange sound, like a drowning mouse.
Not sure where it came from.
Councillor Turley was sabotaging your presentation, not intentionally, of course. Very good. Please proceed. Thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
Turley's got it out of the system now?
Everything's fine. No bugs.
Okay. So I'll continue. The Chamber would like to commend the City for its processes and the procedures and its role of careful financial management. The Chamber Task Force on the budget process, observation of the process, heard of the work of staff to ensure the Council received clearly defined service areas. And I'd like to, as we have Councillor Turley on our sites right now, thank Councillor Turley for him attending meetings with the Chamber of Commerce and explaining the process in great detail to us. Staff shared the information openly with the community through the city's website. This open communications policy and plan led to a public e-town hall held December 7th, just days after council members received the budget package. During this town hall, we were impressed by the depth of knowledge exhibited by council members and the fact they were all taking ownership of budget details. Their familiarity demonstrated they had each spent considerable time in review of the data and had significant conversations among themselves, staff, and community members. We support the areas of special attention in the budget specifically, and because I'm limited by time here, I'm not going to go into great detail. I'm just going to talk about it in terms of thought centers. Public safety, ongoing increased attention required, as the Chamber has pointed to previously. Waterfront development, one key to the future of our economy, as we uncovered so well during our exploration of the Economic Development Strategic Plan. And infrastructure, including support of the continued 1% contribution to General Asset Management Reserve. We're also pleased that current planning respects and retains the knowledge and insight gained through the core service review that was conducted back in 2016. I'm going to go against the grain of some past appraisals of city budgets and proposed tax increases. This year, the Chamber of Commerce heartily applauds City Council and staff in their budget and tax deliberations and their ongoing prudent stewardship. But let's take a look at the world around us. Beginning with a 3-month voluntary closure in March 2020, followed by a slow return to local shopping, reductions in local consumer demand, increasing competition from a global online marketplace, continuing restrictions on food and beverage purveyors, and an uncertain environment for 2021, our local businesses deserve all the help they can get. We participate in something called BC Chamber Mind Reader, a Mind Reader Pulse Check. This is a giant survey conducted multiple times a year in every region of the province, with statistics then compared between geographic regions, between demographics, between industries and sectors. It gives us a really good read on what's happening in the province and in our local economy and in our regional economy and in our provincial economy. December's report indicated that and this is quite surprising, December's report indicated that on Vancouver Island, we have the lowest level of business optimism in the province, with 46% of businesses categorizing themselves in poor or very poor shape. That's almost half of all businesses who have a dismal outlook on their future here. When asked if they were pessimistic or optimistic about the next 12 months, 36% indicated they were pessimistic or very pessimistic. This places our region in second place only to the resource regions of northern BC. I want to remind you that this survey was conducted and the results came back from a survey conducted the first week of December of 2020. That was roughly the same time that it was announced that incoming President Biden was going to stop the Keystone Line. So that was another slam against the resource north that we have here. So they would be in a very poor mood about their opportunities for the future, and we came in a close second as being in a poor mood about our future. Of course, this is a situation we're trying to improve, and if any of you would like, I'm happy to send out links to that report. We're here to propose to Council that they request a report from staff with an analysis of the impact of freezing tax increases on commercial ratepayers for just 1 year to assist and support the business community in Nanaimo to catch back up. The COVID-19 pandemic continues to have a devastating effect on our economy, employment, and business in general. Putting a temporary freeze on commercial ratepayers would show support for local business, would help shape the brand of Nanaimo as business-friendly, and support new efforts at outreach for economic development. Most importantly, it would be a vote of confidence in the business community and perhaps strengthen their resiliency and resolve and encourage them to hold on just a little longer and maybe change that curve on their optimism and pessimism, So we're not asking for Council to make a decision, but we're asking for Council to request from staff a report on the impact on other classes of ratepayers so that we could maybe consider this freeze for the year. That's my presentation, and I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smythe. Questions? Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Mr. Smythe. So a freeze for 1 year, would that have the potential of being made up once hopefully things get back to normal? Or is that a loss of income to the city perpetually based on the 1 year freeze?
And I think it's certainly an option, Councillor Turley, that we would look at that, and maybe have staff include that in the report back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Mr. Smythe, if I may. Kim, are you referring to Class 6 under the business/other, or you are looking at all commercial rate classes?
Looking at all commercial rate classes, not industrial and not residential, obviously.
And the vast majority of the commercial rate classes have decreased from 2019. And I've always been an advocate, and you know that, of reducing the difference between residential and business rates. Never saw the reason for it. Would you also be, instead of maybe a rate increase, looking at a mill rate decrease across the board?
If that had the desired effect of leaving property taxes for commercial where they were last year, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Again, that may be a consideration that the staff report brings back as well. Here are optional ways of dealing with this.
At present, we don't have a motion on the floor. I see no further questions, and I must say in response to Mr. Smythe's request on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce, I think most of us went into this year's budget process and last year's budget process thinking that the tough year would be this year, not last year. Certainly, we have seen a number of our businesses fail in our community. We're seeing more open storefronts. I think this is the tough time. I see I've got Councillors Brown now and Councillor Turley back on the list, so I'll defer to them. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. A question through to staff, if that's okay. Through the budgeting process, and maybe this might just be fuzzy recollection, but didn't one of the staff reports have, or potentially have some sort of some sort of rough numbers on what it would be to just sort of freeze the commercial and only raise residential?
Ms. Mercer.
Through Your Worship, I don't recall that we did a calculation like that. From the budget and the tax preparation, they're very two separate things. So from the budget perspective, we just know how much money we need,
right,
and then we figure out how each class is distributed after that.
Okay.
But as part of the report, I'm assuming we will be asked to do, we will talk about what that looks like.
Okay.
By shifting, and there'll be a few options that we could do.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. The question to Mr. Smythe, and then also potential motion. I'm assuming that we're referring to the financial year 21-22 for this request, because I believe we've already set the budget for, where am I? 21-22, 22-23, am I right?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Turley. We
Yeah.
have determined the amount that we provisionally need. We do have time before final to make any changes that council wishes to when we bring back the budget in March and April for council's final approval. So there is still time to make a change. Yes.
Okay, so, and I'm a little hesitant at this point in time to make a motion, but will there be an opportunity at a future meeting to request the staff look into potential options? Or does that mean to be done today, as far as a motion is concerned?
I think, Councillor Turley, in fairness, we're coming into a busy time of year for staff. If we're going to make the motion and we're asking for a report, the sooner rather than later would be. And I'm seeing nodding heads from senior staff, including the CAO, so.
Okay, at the risk of being hated, I'd like to move that we look into the potential of maintaining the tax rate for commercial for 21-22 at the, now, is it the current rate that you're requesting, Mr. Smythe, or is this a reduced, so it's the same as it was last year?
So it would be frozen at last year.
At last year's levels.
Seconded by Councillor Hemmons. Do you wish to say anything further to the motion, Councillor Turley? No?
that's
Then
fine.
Councillor Bonner, please.
Thank you, Worship. I'll speak the motion. I also have a question of staff, if I may. The only really way we can keep the rates for commercials at what they were paying last year is reduce the mill rate. I'm gathering that's correct?
Ms. Mercer?
We would freeze the amount of money we collected in 2020 and use that to calculate the mill rate.
Mm-hmm.
We would shift, one of the options is to shift that tax burden to another class, most likely residential. So that is one of the options. Yes, we would keep the business class at 2020 dollar levels, and then we will have some options on what to do with that
Yeah.
amount.
So I'm just trying to wrap my head around is we have this bundle of money we need to raise through taxation, and we're just going to decide who pays how much of that, what percentage of that, and we'll be doing that by the mill rate. So we won't in practical terms, we'll be probably, if we do this, freezing the rate, that's the concept here, but we'll be increasing the mill rate for residential and any of the other classes, agricultural, nonprofit, that sort of thing.
That is one of the options, yes.
Could in this report we have a way of looking at all the classes and how much money they would be bringing in and what a change in the mill rate would make for each one? It would help me anyway.
That would be one of, when we brought back, if we shifted anything, we would show you the impact of all of those. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, before I go to Councillor Gesselbrock, the motion requested in Mr. Smyth's letter says, request a report from staff with an analysis of the impact of freezing tax increases on commercial ratepayers for 1 year to assist and support the business community in Nanaimo. I'm wondering if we're agreed that that's the wording of the motion, the mover and the seconder? Councillor Turley? The letter from Mr. Smyth says request a report from staff with an analysis of the impact of freezing tax increases on commercial ratepayers for 1 year to assist and support the business community in Nanaimo.
So as long as the word impact refers to revenue derived by the city from through taxation and not impact on commercial property owners, period, then yes.
I read it as on the city. Councillor Hemmons, are you agreeable to I just want to make sure we're all agreed on what the wording of the motion is. Councillor Gesselbrock, are you finished? Sorry, are you finished, Councillor Bonner?
Yes, I am, sir.
Thank you. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, I'm supportive of the motion. You know, obviously, the COVID has an impact on certain sectors of business, and I think that it's important that we explore options and also communicate, you know, what exactly our tools are. You know, from my experience with tax and shifting tax burden, I think, you know, we are going to see the numbers that won't be very favorable on residential, and I know that there's a division. You know, some businesses have been impacted more than other businesses, and same with some individuals with other individuals, and, you know, using taxes to provide support sometimes is quite a blunt tool. But I think that it's important that we all have the information in front of us to see sort of exactly what that entails. So I appreciate the motion, and it's always good to have information clearly if that staff have the bandwidth to provide this for us. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Briefly through you, thank you, Mr. Smyth, for your presentation and your letter. I also will support the motion. I'm certainly in favor of getting a staff report and giving us some background and some options on this, and I think the intent is good, recognizing that the city, of course, needs to raise money somehow to pay for the services that everybody wants us to provide, and also recognizing that some businesses are doing better than others. And I, for one, would appreciate any more detailed information, Mr. Smyth, that you can provide in the weeks ahead relative to an overall survey of local businesses, how they're doing, how they feel about the future. I'm sure it's not an optimistic viewpoint, but any details would be appreciated. I'll support Councillor Turley's motion, and I was going to say something else, but I can't think of it now, so I'll leave it. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Worship. I'm going to take the unfavorable position and not be supporting this. I would, you know, if we were going to do this, I'd prefer we do it right and to look at a sort of the long-term reduction in, if we are want to go down the reduction in commercial as an overall taxation strategy. To do it for a single year doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me because, well, one, it's completely indiscriminate for whether a business is in need or not in need. Secondly, we don't control the assessment value. So even if we implement a reduction, some of those that might be in need might actually see their taxes go up based on how the assessment comes back. So in terms of an overall effective strategy to assist businesses that may be struggling, it is so far from being targeted to based on need that I think that It doesn't make any sense to task staff with doing it. I would be supportive of looking at that in the long run as our overall taxation scheme, but definitely not as presented and as we've discussed today.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I am going to support this, and I appreciate the larger questions around taxation and how we build the kinds of communities that many of us would want to see. And the complexities of the tax system flow down from the federal to the provincial municipal governments, and everybody's asking for a piece of somebody's pie. But I'm not going to question at this stage in this community's history when we see so much adversity facing our business community. If they have come to us, and this is, I think, a very reasonable proposal, come to us asking for this proposal, I'm not going to question whether we have a better or a worse idea. We're asking for a report from staff. I think it's appropriate. I think we should support it. And yes, it's potentially only for 1 year. But that also gives us time to consider the longer term. I mean, I think one of the purposes of the Mayor's Task Force was to look at longer term strategies. We've just received an economic development task force report. There are lots of big questions for us to look at, but right now, the business community says we're hurting, and we're hurting a lot, and we're asking for you to just do a little study on some relief, so I think it's appropriate. If I haven't inspired anybody else to speak, then I'm going to call for the question. All those in favor? Contrary? Councillor Brown. Councillor Martman, are you in favor or opposed?
I'm in favor.
In favor. Thank you very much. Motion carries. Thank you very much, Mr. Smythe. Appreciate your attendance this morning.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for your support and consideration going forward. Thank you very much.
We have no delegations, Ms. Snellgrove, but we do have a number of reports this morning. And the first is Victoria Road pedestrian upgrades. Mr. Sims, please.
Thank you, Worship. Good morning. This report in front of you is really just an information report. We've juggled the scope around of some of the pedestrian unallocated projects, including the Victoria Crescent. So when we were first before you last year and received funding for these projects, we had a certain scope and a budget in mind. And as the project evolved, we modified the budget of this, or modified the scope, I should say, of this particular project. And we tendered a number of them together, and so we have a very favorable price, and that's allowed us to increase the scope and move some of the funding around, still within the allocation of the pedestrian budget. So it's an information report, and we're ending up with a better project and a still within budget.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sims. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Sims. Thanks, Mr. Sims. There was just one thing in the report that I didn't understand, and I must be reading it incorrectly, but maybe you could help me. Under a discussion in my budget, it's page 11 near the bottom, it says, despite being collectively under budget, both the Victoria Road and Waddington Road projects were individually over budget. So how could two projects both be over budget and then you put them together and they're under budget? I must be misreading that.
So it's the magic of engineering finance as opposed to the magic of finance. So when we approached council last year around the pedestrian unallocated, we had certain budgets in mind for each project, and that sort of summed up. When we put these projects out as a package, we get prices back from the contractor that has, a different, those two projects would have been over our original budget, but the third project was so far under budget. The conglomerate of them came in overall under budget, if that makes sense.
This is engineering at its finest. So thank you, Mr. Sims. We'll leave it at that.
No more questions.
I want to thank Councillor Thorpe for his excellent question. Perfectly reasonable. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. I had the same question. This report tells me that the engineering department and has really been listening in terms of enhancing and advancing certain projects. So I'm really appreciative of that. My question is, if packaging products gives us this much of a surplus, I'm guessing that's something we do all the time anyways, and the cost savings for this are really quite substantial. So is this something we should be looking at doing more often? Or is this just a happenstance that packaging these or bundling these projects together saves us $200,000?
No, I think it's an excellent question, and it's something that we're constantly looking at. When we generally tend to pick our timing of when the project works to be constructed, but also trying to get certain numbers of projects out before the general market is too busy, so that we get that favorable pricing. And the experience has really shown is if we put a single crosswalk improvement out, we get a certain price, but if we bundle 5 of them together, as an example, we get a much better price because the contractor has certainty, can buy in bulk and that sort of thing. So we definitely use that as a strategy.
Okay, great, thank you.
Just as a general question, Mr. Sims, and if you can't answer it, that's fine. Is your sense that we're getting more bids and more favorable bids overall than, say, a year and a half ago when things were really humming? Is there a bit more pressure on pricing, downward pressure now because of changes in the economy?
Your Worship, I think we've had some favorable pricing over the last year. As a year ago, it was surprising, but we saw that the challenges we're seeing is more on the building end of things, where steel and concrete. Less so on the pipe and the basics, the road construction, that sort of thing. So far, our budgets are holding well for any of the tenders that are out. For example, Front Street just closed very favorably as well. So that we're still seeing good pricing, I think, and a good number of bids. I think the competition is there, but it's not. It's not a famine out there in the construction industry by any stretch.
Thank you very much. No further questions? Mr. Sims, thank you for the update. Much appreciated. The next is the provision of barrier-free menstrual products in city facilities. Mr. Harding.
Good morning, Worship. I'm going to quickly introduce this, but I also initially wanted to introduce Council to Mr. Mike Bryson, which you haven't met yet. So Mr. Bryson joined us at the end of 2020, and he comes to us with many years of experience in Western Canada managing a variety of different recreation facilities and sports facilities, and very pleased to have him, but we haven't had an opportunity to find a way to introduce you with COVID and everything, so we want to at least introduce Mr. Bryson to you. I'm going to quickly introduce this and then I'll leave it to Mr. Groot and Mr. Bryson to explain options to you, because we provided Council a few options, but on page 14, it goes back to November of 2 motions that Council passed, and we've come back to you with some opportunities and options for you to review. So I will turn it over to Council. Any questions you have to Mr. Groot or Mr. Bryson?
Firstly, Mr. Bryson, on behalf of Council, welcome to the City of Nanaimo. Delighted to have you on board. We think it's the greatest place in the world, but, you know, could be wrong, could be right. I suspect we're right. Enough said. Mr. Groot, good morning. Who wants to go first? Mr. Bryson, please.
Okay. Guess I pressed that. Morning, Mayor and Council. So the report that we had put forward was to provide barrier-free menstrual products in the City of Nanaimo. The purpose of the report was to provide Finance and Audit Committee the information regarding provision of barrier-free menstrual products in the City of Nanaimo. We recommended that the Council direct staff to initiate a project in 2021 funded by the Strategic Infrastructure Reserve for supply, install, and stocking of dispensers in 26 female and universal washrooms at certain locations. The locations are Bevan Park, Bowen Park, Nanaimo Aquatic Center, Nanaimo Ice Center, both facilities there, Oliver Woods Community Center, Caledonia Park for showers, North Hill Tourism Visitor Center, and we would review the use and at the end of 2021 return to Council with an update and recommendations at that time. So we chose the facilities that we did because they're the ones that are in use mostly right now. A lot of our facilities are not in use, so we wanted to, if we had to have an impact and have some usable data to come back with, choose facilities that are being used by the public on a regular basis. So that's why those facilities were chosen. We chose roughly half of the washrooms in those facilities to put the dispensers in and then monitor and see how it goes from there. So we did entertain the period promise program that United Way has, and it's a very successful program, and some communities are using it quite successfully, and other communities have decided to opt out of it and go with their own programs. We looked at some of the examples from other cities. We contacted the city of Coquitlam, city of Port Moody, city of Victoria, and then of course we talked to the school district 68 here in Nanaimo because they're also using this system. The Period Promise program has 3 ways to partner with United Way. They include running a workplace campaign where they would come in and help you set up a campaign to collect products to dispense in the community. You can also make a financial donation to support their program as they're trying to enter other communities and provide this service as well. Or you could sign on and simply promise to supply products to your municipality and make sure that clients and staff and people are able to access them. So, most of the municipalities introduce the programs under pilot projects, as we're suggesting, and allow time to review use, costs, and any other issues. And of course, under current pandemic conditions, running a pilot project would not return usable data due to restricted access to facilities, as I mentioned earlier. So what we would do is we would install dispensers in the recreation facilities that I identified in probably May by the time we get them in and get them installed. We also suggested that, there are some programs in the city that are working right now. The shower program in Caledonia Park has a program where they do offer supplies to people that use the showers if it's requested. They don't have them out where they can be accessed, but they do provide them, and that's somewhat successful. I mean, they don't give out a lot, but they do provide them. There's also the Women's Resource Center, also supplies products to folks that come in and ask for them, so they are also doing their part. So they're hitting a different demographic than we would through our recreation complexes. We had entertained putting some in our parks washrooms, but we're seeing a lot of impact to the parks washrooms as it is right now. So we felt for this pilot, putting products in our parks washrooms would probably not be as productive as we'd like it to be. In the future, if it goes well and we're getting a lot of good positive response from the public, then maybe that's something we can entertain. But right now we've decided to, or we would like to prefer to leave them out of those facilities. As for cost, to supply and install dispensers would be $750. Dispensers would be refilled by custodial staff, installed by our own staff as well. And in talking with other facilities, Victoria is probably the closest one to us as far as their operation, and they are spending between $2,000 and $3,000 per dispenser per year. So I guess that's kind of where we are with that. I'm not sure if there's anything else. I think you had the report. Is there any questions you had for me or anything I can answer?
Thank you very much, Mr. Bryson. Councillor Turley?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Bryson. I'm trying to figure out what a dispenser is. Is this a token-operated item, or is it a box that anybody can help themselves to?
Through Your Worship, to Mr. Turley, Councillor Turley. No, the dispensers are modified, so it is a free dispenser. So people could come up and actually get a product out of it without having to put any money in it at all.
So I guess the money part I understand, but my concern is if these products are not somehow regulated, I guess is the best way of putting it. I can see a new business starting up with a zero cost of goods situation and at the cost of the city. So, you know, I'm just trying to picture what the dispenser is. Is it just you go in, you push a button, and out pops the item?
Very much.
And so you could stand there and push the button 100 times, walk out with the stuff, and your day's sales are there.
Well, hopefully they put it to use, and it's, yeah, it's the downside of it, of course, it is a free product, and it's free to anyone that accesses those facilities. The school, District 68, they were the only ones that said they had problems with, I guess, students that would go in and take as many as they could and then make a mess of it. And Port Moody, I think, tried to put it into their public washrooms, or pardon me, the parks washrooms, and they found there was a mess created from that. So there is that risk, and I guess as far as, you know, the return on investment, whatever, it's a service that, you know, looking at providing for the folks that are needing them out in the streets. So it's, yeah, it's not without its risks for sure, and that's why we suggested or are proposing that we only do 26 of the multitude of washrooms we have, and you know, that would give us an idea of if this is going to be a project worth following, or if we need to scale back or modify.
Could I have a follow-up? So if the project works well, is there potential to have these dispensers token operated, or are they just set for pushing the button?
I believe they are modified to dispense for free, so I'm certain they could be modified to go back to a token operated system.
In order, Councillors Bonner, Councillor Martman, and then Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you very much for this report. Really much appreciated it. To Councillor Turley's point, they operate similar to how the toilet paper dispenser operates. You can have as much as you need. And I expect that anybody who takes them would probably want to use them. So I don't have a problem there. I'm quite happy with the report and the recommendations as they sit. I think it's a good start. It's my hope that I'm looking at this thing as there's a lot of philosophical discussion on this, and people have been talking to me about it all the time. And I believe that we're trying to build equity. We're trying to build equality through building equity here. And what we're doing here is spending a bit more money for a certain section of our society. And I've heard a lot of discussions both ways on this thing, and the whole concept that this seems to be, some people have told me this is a women's issue, and women have been dealing with this for a long period of time, and it's not. It's every single one of us exists because of this natural process. And so it's all of our responsibility, and I'm quite sure that over a period of time, that this will become a normal thing to be in our public washrooms, and that people will use it in a normal way, just like they're using toilet paper now. And so in that reason, I'm quite supportive of option one. I do have a question, though, on finances. One of the options is, I'm gathering, is to take it from our strategic infrastructure reserve. The second one would be to raise taxes, I'm guessing. What about taking it just out of the Parks and Rec budget? I know that, you know, we're in a particular period of time here where some of the facilities aren't being used, some are down. Is there any way, because eventually this will end up in their budget anyway if it becomes a long-term service. So is there any room in the Parks and Rec budget for this sort of thing?
Ms. Mercer.
Through your worship to Councillor Bonner, that would be something that the Parks and Rec Department would have to go back and look at their budgets to see where they could repurpose money in their current budget. So it is something that we could look at, but that is something that Mr. Harding's department will have to look at.
Okay. Do we know how long that might take, or?
Mr. Harding.
I usually give all the financial questions to Laura to answer, but if we can go back and look again at what if you're looking for us to remove something from this year's budget to do this, or just to how to increase our operating, is that the question?
Well, I'm wondering if because of COVID and we have some of our facilities are closed, there might be some savings that are taking place, or not. Is there any? Are we seeing anything that might be available in future? I'm just kind of looking for different funding models.
Yeah, I wouldn't say this year we'll be showing any savings. In fact, if council members in November when we did the budget, we had to see how the COVID and reopening the facilities was going to cost. So we will be coming back to council with an update on our reduced revenues again from the last 4 or 5 months and their increased costs. So I don't think our operating is going to be a great picture coming back to you. We'll see what it looks like in March when we come back, but we can include that kind of review in if you want.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Martman.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Hello?
We can hear you.
Okay, so I was thinking along the same lines as Councillor Bonner I was looking at this as cost of supplies like toilet paper and paper towel, etc. In reading the report and seeing that the dispensaries are $750 each, and since these products are meant to be free, I had envisioned something as simple as like a basket in every washroom, and the supplies just put in a basket. And since they say the problems with the dispensaries is vandalism, I'm just wondering, as a pilot project, if we actually need the dispensaries fit together, cost $19,500.
Mr. Bryson.
Oops, sorry. So, Your Worship, to the councillor. We looked at all options. This was, I guess, the best way to regulate how much product we were actually using. We could keep an eye on it a little closer. It just seemed to be a more formal or a better process to have these kinds of dispensers in place than if we do decide to expand on them, modify them. They're already in place, the cost is already done, and so that's kind of the decision we went with. It's not to say it's the only decision, there are definitely options. It's just the one that we thought was the best fit for the project, or the project at this point.
Any other questions, Councillor Martman? Thank you very much. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks, staff, for this report. Super supportive of the recommendations. I don't think the world needs my commentary on why I think this, or why this may be a good idea or not. I think it's a pilot, so that's great. The one thing I'm wondering is, how will we, at the end of the pilot, sort of what metrics will we use to, or how will we be evaluating it to say, hey, this was a successful pilot, maybe we should consider expanding it, or no, the pilot wasn't successful, we might want to change course.
Mr. Groot.
The metrics are a little bit difficult, but really it comes down to establishing some sort of protocol at each of the facilities where they're at, just keeping track of how much product is used from a custodial perspective. How often are we cleaning, discarded product or just, product that's been taken out, not for its proper use, but just for antics or whatever. And then just also looking at vandalism in general to see. So they're pretty high level, but it's really going to be facility based, and the information is really going to be coming from staff.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. First, a question through to staff. The 7 locations that are listed in the report, are there currently menstrual products available there? I know at some of our rec facilities you can ask for something at the front counter.
Get this right yet. Through Your Worship, to Councillor Hemmons. Right now, a lot of our products are available at counters. Bevan Pool and NAC, we have the products available from staff. So if people ask for them, they can get them that way.
Okay, thank you. Recognizing that we don't have a motion on the floor, I am going to argue against the recommendations for a few reasons. And I've spoken to Dawn about this, and I have so much gratitude for you bringing this forward. It's not an easy conversation to have. I had a really strong reaction to this, to Dawn moving this initially, and I had to go away and think about that. And what I landed on is that because I know Dawn, I know this is an equity issue. I know that's exactly why you're doing this. And I think I've worked in the women's health field for a number of years, and if equity is what we're aiming for here, providing free menstrual products is not the best use of $71,000, in my opinion. I also had a very practical reaction to this, and that's that if these products are available at our facilities already, I wonder if we could spend $100 instead of the suggested $71,000 and have some well-designed posters put in all of our public facilities saying, if you require menstrual products, you can discreetly ask at the front counter and we'll provide them for you. I feel like this is overkill, if I could be blunt like that. I think about organizations in our community who are doing work around women's equity, like Haven, like the Women's Resource Center, like the Immigrant Welcome Center, and what they could do with $71,000 to empower women, or to deal with challenges of equity in our community. Also practically, the school district does a wonderful job of this. They adopted, I think it was last year, they decided to provide free menstrual products in all of their schools. And that really is the demographic that I think of in terms of perhaps some shyness around asking for those products. So the school district takes care of those folks who are in school and 17 and under and who are perhaps more vulnerable to stating their needs in that way. To the basket comment, that's where I initially went to, Councillor Martman, is can we not just have a basket on the counter? But I had some involvement in the creation of the Barsby Wellness Center at John Barsby, which is a high school, and we put condoms on the counter of the public health clinic, and there were condoms all over the school. And also to hear from the school district that this vandalism was an issue in schools. So I think our best option at this point for me, from my perspective, is to say that the city is open to providing these products very discreetly. We probably don't need to spend $71,000, and if we're really interested in women's equity, we should be having different conversations, in my opinion, than this one. Yeah, I'm going to leave it there. And I just want to express my gratitude to Councillor Bonner. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Himmons. When this matter first came up, I've used this phrase many times, that sometimes I think with the best of intentions, we create a solution in search of a problem. And I'm going to come back to a couple of things. If this is a poverty issue in the sense that we wish to provide an absolutely necessary basic product that is used by every female, hopefully, at some stage and stages of their lives, then this isn't going to do it. If it is about providing convenience for a situation where one is caught short, so to speak, this doesn't improve what we have done already discreetly and quietly for a number of years without, as Councillor Martin pointed out, an expensive dispensing machine or anything of that nature. If we want to address it from a amelioration of poverty perspective, people who can't afford the product, they should frankly be in all the public washrooms, which are already the subject of a significant amount of vandalism, as I understand it from staff, and I see Mr. Groot nodding, which is disappointing and saddening and frustrating, and I understand why people do it and how grim it must be to be of that state of mind that you think it's appropriate or okay to damage public property that's been provided for public use. But this doesn't improve the situation, and I appreciate that, as Councillor Himmons has pointed out about Councillor Bonner's motivation for this, which is based on I think, an absolutely appropriate principle. It is around equity. He can make little jokes about, yes, it's just like toilet paper. Most people don't think of it that way, but he's absolutely right. It's a basic product. It's needed. You know, I have a wife, I have a daughter, I have granddaughters. It's the way it is. I would like to think we live in a community where no female of any age should be embarrassed to go up to a counter at a public facility and ask for something as basic as this. It is no different than if you run out of toilet paper in a washroom. None of us would have a moment's hesitation going up to the business owner or the restaurant operator or whatever and saying, by the way, you're out of toilet paper. Having said that, in terms of money, people look to council for leadership, for signals about what are priorities, what are important. And I must say, from my perspective, I'm not entirely sure from the report what it's costing us right now in terms of providing these products at these facilities, but we are doing it. And I think Councillor Hemmons' comments around a poster campaign, which would be far cheaper, will essentially advertise that it is important to the city and to the leadership of this community, and we are the elected leadership. But it's also a very practical approach, consistent with what we've done, and I think consistent with the public viewpoint, because we're not going to solve the problem for the broader community in terms of access to these products. I don't think anyone is going to welcome the concept, as Councillor Martman pointed out. You know, people could wander in, or Councillor Turley's concern around people wandering in and picking up 30 or 40 and walking out because they can't afford to pay for it because assistance rates are ridiculously low or they're suffering poverty. So I'm going to be with Councillor Hemmons on this one. Councillor Bonner and then Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Worship. I'd like to move option 1, if I may. And I'll look for seconder and then speak to it if I could.
Moved by Councillor Bonner, seconded by Councillor Brown.
And Your Worship, you always inspire me to talk more. I appreciate that. I never looked at this issue as a question of solving poverty or a poverty issue. It's just a basic necessity that should be there, and why hasn't it been there for the last 300 years? And when you talk about the city as a question of leadership, I think that's exactly what we're doing here, because this product should be available in all washrooms everywhere. It should just be a no-brainer, if I may say. Like, why wouldn't it be there? And to your point about discreetly walking up to a person at a service desk and asking for some. If we had a law that said only women could work at service desks, I would look at that, but we don't. We have men who work at service desks as well, right? And so I would think that a person or a young woman that might have a problem asking a male for menstrual products, who she has never met before. So, and a lot of times, one of the conversations that came up in this is that we've always made do. We've always managed to do it, make it do. And that's coming from women who said this isn't really a big thing because we always managed to make do. And I think that is the problem here, is women should not have to make do. They should not have to find ways to get around this particular issue that is a very basic necessity need. So I'm quite in support of this. I'm fine with taking it out of the infrastructure reserve. Just to get the ball rolling. I think we're not even leadership, and there's many other municipalities are way ahead of us on this. So we're basically going to catch up here. So that's all I have to say is I believe that this is a basic necessity that we should be providing, and providing the leadership so that other organizations provide it as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Worship. I got to say, I'm torn with this. I hear the principles that Councillor Bonner is expressing, and when I think about, like, yeah, why isn't this product just seen as something that, like toilet paper, that is being offered? We spend a lot of public funds on toilet paper. In other places, they charge when I've been traveling, and there's all this attention around this product and for feminine hygiene, and I think this is a bigger question of how we're looking at things in gender equity. And I also recognize that, like, I'm a dude, and it's not something that I really have much authority on to take initiative on and express, and I really look to my female colleagues for some guidance on this. And I'm hearing from one female colleague that this is important from Councillor Martman and from Councillor Hemmond, that the funds could be better directed, and just the logistical considerations around providing these products. It might be easier with posters and people to take them as opposed to having the dispensers, which there are issues. And really, when I think about like the issues are caused because we've been so weird about this stuff up until this point that it's like a novel thing to have feminine hygiene products available for free in a bathroom. And like, so really my brain is quite spinning, and I do think that this is an important thing to discuss and wrap our heads on, but I do not have a firm position on it yet. I got to say I'm leaning towards Councillor Bonner and Councillor Martman's take on this, and think that we just need to go ahead and try this out and introduce. But I also, think the logistical considerations and the points raised by Director Hemmons are important, and I can see why it'd be better to have more women on our council to support with the deliberations on this. Thank you.
In order, Councillors Thorpe, Brown, Hemmons, and then Councillor Martman. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I appreciate the discussion to this point, and I also appreciate the report. Very good, thank you. I was waiting to speak until there was a motion on the floor, but I'm glad that I did so I could hear the comments of others first. I'm not going to support the motion that we're debating. And I had some notes made of my reasoning. I really want to say first that I appreciate the perspective of Councillor Hemmons, who covered off several of the points I was and will make, but I do appreciate hearing from her, especially. One thing that we seem to be skipping over on this, I think, is the fact that these products are already available at most of our facilities. And I know that the people that I have had conversations on this topic about, because I wanted to hear what people thought, the common response was, well, if they're already available, why don't you just simply make that better known? Increased signage or discreet advertising or whatever. And I think somebody used the word overkill with this proposed response, and it's well intended, but I just don't see it when the products are already there, already available, and we're providing the service. And yes, people have to ask, but it's done, I'm sure, discreetly. The second thing that I wanted to mention is that this motion is not a response to a public outcry that members of the public have been bombarding us with emails and phone calls saying that they see this as a great priority. Yes, it's an interesting initiative, and I applaud Councillor Bonner for it, but I don't see the public viewing this as some huge priority that we need to address in this way. And I guess because of that, that leads to my third concern, which is a main one, and that is, to put it bluntly, the price. We're talking, and I know this is a pilot project, but we're anticipating $71,500 per year, $71,500 per year, and that's without any consideration for vandalism, which, quite frankly, I fear is going to be fairly significant. That's a lot of dollars for something that the public has not told us that they are strongly wanting. It's a lot of dollars that this council could spend in a lot better ways. And I recall an earlier meeting where we turned down a request for $5,000 to investigate the potential of acquiring some very significant extra parkland, because we didn't think that was a good use of $5,000. Well, I don't think this is a good use of $71,500, and I certainly would not support having it come from the Parks and Rec budget. But that's a separate discussion. So all in all, I think for me, the fact that the products are already available, we can just improve our communication with the public. We don't need this massive, expensive experiment to do something we're already doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. To Councillor Hammond's point, I think it's an interesting item to raise, that we could be having conversations around gender equity and how to, best spend $70,000 if that's what we're going to do. But I think the simple fact of the matter is that we don't. And and the times that we do, it feels very much like this debate. And I don't think that's probably the best approach to tackling something as important as equity in general. So for me, I think that it doesn't need to be an only thing. I would much rather have conversations around what does equity look like in our facilities? What does equity look like in ensuring that people can maybe have children and attend council meetings, or have children and be on council? I think those are all very important discussions that we probably, for being in the year 2020, haven't been having enough of those discussions, at least at the council table. Like, I can't speak to what's happening at the committee level. I haven't tuned into enough of the one committee that comes to mind to know. So with all that said, I think that I very much am like Councillor Gesselbrock. I don't know what the right answer is, what the right path forward is. Further, as someone that doesn't have, comes from a place of extreme privilege, had to tackle navigating some of these things. And then I very much agree with Councillor Bonner, is making do is not good enough. So, I think for me, if the point of a pilot project is you trial it, and if there's use, then you know that maybe it's worth exploring further. I would like to have known what's the uptake now, how much are we spending in budgetary matters, and to me those would be important comparisons if this did pass, and we know that we are spending $1,500 worth of product, but we put in these dispensers and we're having $4,500 of product. Okay, clearly the program is working in some fashion. So I think those are important things to consider. So yeah, it's $70,000, and I do agree that costs a lot. Maybe the pilot could be reduced in scope, but ultimately I think the point of a pilot is you're not sure if it's the right thing to do. That's why you pilot it, and you get that data, and you find out if it's a path worth going on for further rollout. So I will be supporting it, and see where it goes. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Martman. Councillor Martman?
Thank you. Thank you. I'm really struggling with this one, but I couldn't hear everything that everybody was saying because it breaks up, and I really wanted to hear more of what Councillor Hemmons was saying, but I think I got the gist of it. And I'm tending to lean towards, I believe Councillor Hemmons was talking about proper posters and education, and that the product is available. I got a lesson from my young daughter. Well, she's not that young, she's in her 30s, but around this, and she said, "Mom, there is no shame in asking for this product. You're so old school that no young girl would, in this day, from her point of view, is embarrassed to talk about this. This is a new generation now. This is not anything to be ashamed of. This isn't anything to be embarrassed about asking for." And so because this product is available, I think we could do better education. We could bring it to the forefront that, like my daughter said, it shouldn't be anything. It should be like, oh, by the way, you're, like you said with the restaurant, if you're out of toilet paper, you let people know you're out of toilet paper. But there shouldn't be anything wrong with asking for this product. I think this amount of money during a pandemic is an awful lot for us to be spending. And I think we haven't heard from the public that this is something that women are crying for. I understand the equity. I understand that really this is a product that should be looked at like toilet paper and paper towel. But on the other hand, we're in a pandemic and we've got security issues and homeless issues, and we're talking about $78,000 or $71,000 for something I'm not sure is even needed at this time. So right now, I think I'm going to be voting against it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hemmens?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be brief. I just want to respond to some of the points that have been raised. To Councillor Bonner, I completely agree that these products should be as readily available as toilet paper. That's, period. That was funny. The problem, though, is that when we say if we're going to only hire women to work at our front counters, that's going to resolve it. That's actually part of the problem, I think, is if a young woman isn't comfortable going to a 20-year-old dude and saying, hey, I need some products, then that's a bigger issue for me than whether the products are available. And that is being dealt with through the United Way's period Promise campaign and through the school district's new initiative. And whether this passes or not, I think this conversation is leadership. So I just want to be clear about that. To Zenny and your daughter, I mean, we've had this conversation. I completely agree with her. I think the world is changing. Women have been having this conversation forever, you know. To the pilot conversation and the desire to test something that we don't have an answer to, I agree with that premise. If we're going to pilot something, though, have we spoken to, have we done an environmental scan to see where in the city these products are available? Have we spoken to the school district? Have we chatted with the Women's Resource Center? Like, it's great to want to try something new and be a pilot and test it, but if we don't even know the landscape that pilot exists in yet, I don't think it's a fair idea to think that. I just don't think it's a strong pilot, because I'm going to leave that point. I'm sorry, I'm a little discombobulated. This conversation is kind of freaking me out in a good way. But yeah, I'm having clearly an emotional reaction to this, where I think, here comes another, I'm going to be really blank, here comes a solution from someone who thinks that we need this. And we have been having this conversation forever. And if we really want to tackle gender equity, I would champion that until the ends of the earth, but I don't think this is the way to do it. And if this fails, I will happily move that staff look into a better communication option for sharing with the public that these products are available at our civic facilities. So thank you, that was very long-winded.
Thank you, and I don't wish to appear to pile on, but we all fall into our roles in our relationships, and the relationship I have with my wife is of long standing. It's been longer than several council members have been drawing air. I have done the grocery shopping and much of the shopping throughout our marriage. I have bought menstrual products in the early days, bought condoms and birth control pills and everything else, and it wouldn't have crossed my mind to give a thought as to whether I was embarrassing the pharmacist or the clerk, whether they be male or female. I think Councillor Martman's comments are very timely. There will be no change if we don't simply accept that we are all human beings and that no young woman, no older woman, no person should ever feel any distress in approaching a male at a counter at a public facility to ask for a product which is just as essential as toilet paper, to use Councillor Bonner's words. And we're not going to get to that stage if, in fact, some people feel uncomfortable unless we actually just get on with it. I'm very supportive of what Councillor Hemmens has had to say, particularly around advertising it. I suspect that this is, as I said at the beginning of this debate when this was first brought to Council, this was, for me, particularly in the middle of a pandemic and challenging times when we have the Chamber of Commerce coming to us and begging for tax relief for its members, for us to be considering spending this money when we have not seen a public outcry or request or demand for it. Heck, we've had more calls in the weekend over getting their snow removed than anyone's ever called me about the provision of menstrual products in public facilities. So I'm not going to be supporting the motion. Councillor Gesselbrock, it appears you might have the last word.
Thank you, Worship. First off, I do have a question to staff. Like, I think I will be deferring, well, taking the leadership of my female colleagues on this. I don't think that this issue in question and what it's the larger discussion that's related to around gender equity is over, and I hope that it's not a discussion that's over at this council table, and definitely would support Councillor Hemmond with a motion around greater, if there's more education and awareness around the availability of these products. My one question around equity, though, and maybe this is to staff, is and to Councillor Bonner and Councillor Hemmons, is just around access to these products for folks that are living, that are more vulnerable and don't have access to basic hygiene to begin with, that are living on the streets and the homelessness. Especially one of the locations was Caledonia Park, where the shower program, and saying that there'd be a dispenser there. I think that, I don't know what currently is set up, but I think that that probably would be a good idea to supply these products there, because these folks are really struggling with just basic hygiene to begin with, and then it's an added burden for women. So Caledonia Park, Bowen Park is another area where there's a lot of homelessness and encampments, and folks don't have access to basic needs. And yeah, I don't know what the ecosystem is like for this type of support with the service providers, but if the city, if there's a gap there and we can support that, I would like us to be doing something about that. So that's a question, I guess, to staff, and maybe Councillor Hemmons and Bonner could chime in if they have any information. Thanks.
All right, no further. Councillor Hemmons, is there something else you wanted to say?
Thank you. Just quickly to Councillor Gesselbrock, I did check in with someone last night, and it appears that a number of our service providers who deal with the homeless population provide this, along with warm jackets, et cetera, and that it is available at the Caledonia Shower Program upon request. So that the unhoused population, according to what I learned, has access.
Okay, thank you. And just follow up on that. So I do think this is important. Like, in terms of this not being an issue that we've heard from the public, I can understand that from folks that are more privileged and would write to mayor and council and that, but like a woman living with homelessness in downtown, I do not think I'm going to hear from them whether this is an issue or not. And I want to be damn sure that this is not an issue before I withhold this service to a person when we're in a position that we can. And so I really hope that especially Councillor Bonner and Councillor Hemmons that are on the Homelessness Coalition and have contact can find out information and see if there is a gap. And if it is, that a motion would come forward that we would look at providing that service should, as this one fails. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further speakers, the motion is option 1. All those in favour, raise their hands. Councillors Brown and Councillor Bonner. All those opposed, Councillors Gesselbrock, Hemmons, Krogh, Thorpe, Turley, and Martman. The motion is defeated. Councillor Hemmons. I'm sorry, Councillor Turley was in there first.
Councillor Hemmons is going to make a second motion. I'll let her make it and I'll second it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turley. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. This is hastily written, but I would move to direct staff to make available upon request at all named facilities menstrual products, and that communication be placed in those facilities identifying their availability.
Councillor Turley seconding it. Councillor Hemmons, do you wish to speak to it?
No, I think I've said enough. Okay. Thank you.
I'm looking to Mr. Bryson, Mr. Gruder, Mr. Harding in terms of budgetary consequences. Apart from making it known, do you think there is any significant budgetary consequence of this motion that we should be considering? Do we need a staff report first, I guess is what I'm saying.
Your Worship, I'll jump in. We do that now. I think what we can increase is the advertising that's available. I don't see a major impact. If it does come to a point, we'd change our operating accounts based on that demand over years. But right now, we'll see what the demand is.
Thank you, because I'm constantly harping on first heard deferred, but it appears, and I'm not seeing any strained looks on the faces of Ms. Mercer or Ms. Legan or Ms. Fuller back there around the monetary side of this. So I'm going to actually support this motion because it doesn't appear to do any damage to our budgetary process. Mr. Rudolph, you're no? All right. All those in favor? Any contrary? Seeing none, motion carries. Thank you very much. That was a very useful debate, and I'm appreciative of Councillor Bonner bringing it forward for the best of reasons. The next is the Heritage Facade Grant, 315 Fitzwilliam Street. Mr. Lindsay.
Good morning, Your Worship.
Good
Council.
morning.
As you mentioned, the next item on your agenda is a requested Heritage Facade Grant, and it's for the St. Andrew's United Church in the amount of $20,000. Staff have reviewed the grant request and believe it complies with our criteria and are recommending to the committee that it proceed with support. Mr. Schulberg, who is the planner involved with this file, is here this morning and able to answer any specific questions that Council may have about the project.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lindsay, and thanks, Mr. Schulberg, for coming this morning. Is there anyone who cares to make the motion? Moved Councillor Brown, seconded Councillor Thorpe. Is there any discussion on this? Seeing none, I'm going to say one thing. It's always been my fond hope, having seen the historic pictures of this particular church in our community, that someday we'll be in a position financially to assist them, and they'll be in a position to actually restore the original, take off the ugly gray stucco and put it back to where it was. It is, as I think most everyone here has probably attended, one of the loveliest venues for a concert that the city has, and is an important part of this community's heritage, and a great church in terms of pursuit of social and economic justice issues over the years as well. So, all those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is other grant, Alano Club of Nanaimo Society, and Mr. Lindsay again.
Thank you, Your Worship. We're here this morning to seek the committee's direction with respect to a grant request for the Alano Club. Before I speak to the specific request, I'd like to give some background to Council on this item, or to the committee on this item. And as you recall, just earlier this month, Council actually approved the social grants for 2021. And there was $115,000 in your budget that was provided to various organizations in the community. And we would note that in 2021, the program was heavily oversubscribed. So we, as I mentioned, gave out $115,000 in grants, but there was just over $500,000 in requests that came in. In the social response grants alone, there was, which is $90,000 of that program, there was 14 grants that were applied for. 3 after their review was completed were deemed worthy of being awarded the full amount. Two were suggested to be issued at less than requested, but 9 of the applicants did not receive any money. So, Your Worship, fast forwarding to this item, so the Alano Club was an application under the social grant program. Unfortunately, when we originally came to Council, we were of the understanding that this application had come in late, and as such, it was not included in the original package to Council. After completion of our original report to Council, it was deemed that due to an internal administrative error that was in fact deemed to have come in on time and was in compliance with the deadline. So first of all, I'd like to apologize to both the Alano for that mistake, and also for Council for putting you in this position. However, when we've taken a look at the application, and if we go back and we reset and we apply the criteria that were used to evaluate all of the other grants that came in under the 2021 social grant program, we do not believe that it would have displaced or changed the recommendations in the original report. So as such, we're not recommending that the grant proceed. There is, however, an option included in the report. There is a separate grant stream that's in our budget of a small amount of $7,000, which is unsubscribed at this time. And it's option 2, council could proceed if they would like with allocating directly to the Alano Club. Now, the $7,000 is not the original request. The original request was $15,000, but $7,000 is the only unsubscribed grant program that we have at this time. And Your Worship, certainly happy to take any questions on that. Mr. Stewart is here with me this morning, and we can answer any specific questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions for staff? Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I thought I saw it in the report, but I can't find it now. Through you to staff, a question regarding the other grant funding. My understanding was that that was not to be used for operational expenses. Am I correct there? Mr. Lindsay, or can you point me to it in the report? I'm sure I saw it somewhere.
I think...
Your Worship, through Councillor Thorpe, that if you're referring to the $7,000 grant that's eligible, I don't, and maybe I'll look to finance for this, but I don't believe there's any criteria necessarily.
Through Your Worship to Councillor Thorpe, yes, that's correct. The other grant should not be used for operations.
That's what I thought. Thank you. So, Your Worship, if you wish a motion, I'll make one. If not, I'll wait. Then I would move option 1, that council not allocate, and I will speak briefly to that if I get a seconder.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmons. Councillor Thorpe, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. The only reason, and first of all, I absolutely recognize the value of the Alano Club and the work that they do. And this is not a reflection on them at all. But the only reason we're discussing this today is that we thought their grant had come in late, and it wasn't considered in conjunction with all of the other applications. And we've been told quite clearly that comparing it to the other applicants, it simply would not have qualified on the basis of the grant criteria. So I think in fairness, we can't turn around and say, oh, well, we thought you had a late application, but we'll give you the grant money. It doesn't stack up compared to others, unfortunately, perhaps, but that's the way it is. So I don't see us making a special exception for it today. And as far as the 7,000 other grant option, my reading of this is it would be used for operational expenses, and so I wouldn't support that either. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. A question, if I may, through you. When I sat on the Grants Advisory Committee, we would receive applications from agencies looking for rent reductions through renting of civic facilities. Does that still exist, that option?
Mr. Harding, all eyes are on you.
Sorry, Your Worship, Mr. Bonner can repeat the question, I guess the last bit of it.
Do we still have the ability for agencies to apply for a reduction of rent for renting civic facilities like rooms and that sort of thing?
Well, they wouldn't reduce rent, but there's a scale based on if they're a nonprofit organization versus profit. There's a scale of rates, so a nonprofit get a reduced rate, if that's what you mean?
Well, it was specifically when we were on the Grants Advisory Committee, we would get applications asking for rent relief. I'm quite sure that was the case. Remember?
Not that I recall.
Okay.
Yes, Your Worship, if I could answer, just to clarify, so the bylaw for our facilities is a bylaw, and we don't reduce it, but there is a discounted rate based on if you're a youth, you get certain youth organization, nonprofit, certain rate at the lowest versus up to the commercial rate, and then things in between. So adult nonprofit have a different rate, but we don't waive the fees.
Councillor Bonner, I think Ms. Mercer has something to offer, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, under the other grant, there is in-kind funding for facility rental. So you are correct, there was, I think it was the Volunteer Association or that society rented one of our Beban rooms, I believe, and that grant covered the cost of that rental. So, and I think they received that several years. So there is still that ability under this other grant.
Okay, that's what I thought, yeah.
Councillor Turley, and then
Thank you, Your
Councillor
Worship.
Martman.
Through you to probably Ms. Mercer. So if I understand the $7,000, the particular grant didn't receive any applications this year, so that $7,000 then goes back as part of the overage for determining next year's budget?
Mercer?
Through Your Worship, if the money is unspent, it goes into surplus. So yes.
Councillor Martman.
Thank you, Your Worship. I understand the importance of the Lano Club, and especially nowadays with addictions and homelessness, etc. However, after the application was received, it scored lower than some of the others that had applied that we did not grant any money to. And for that reason, I don't see how we can break through our process and look at one organization that we have checkpoints and process for that did not receive monies and give any monies to this organization. So unfortunately, I would not support it.
Thank you very much. Seeing no other speakers, all those in favor of the motion to deny the allocation, raise your hands. Councillors Hemmens, Krog, Thorpe, Bonner, and those in support of the, opposed to the application to deny the allocation. Yes. Councillors Gesselbrock and Turley, Brown. And did we hear from Councillor Martman?
Can I have the motion read back to me, please?
Yeah, the motion is to deny the allocation of $7,000.
Oh, okay.
Are you in support or opposed?
I'm support and denying.
Thank you. I think we're all clear now. The motion carries. That's why they told us never to use double negatives. Reallocation of $60,000 from the ERP replacement project budget from 2022 to 2021 in the 2021-2025 financial plan. That's quite the title. Ms. Legan, please. Thank you, Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. I'll try and unpack that for you very quickly. An ERP is the enterprise resource planning software that we use to run our human resource information systems, our payroll, and all of our financial systems. SAP, which is our legacy system, gave us notice a couple years ago that they would be sunsetting the version that we have. We have an opportunity to upgrade or to replace it with a different software package. In 2017, we ran an RFI, request for information, to gauge what this replacement or upgrade would cost us. During the pandemic, SAP, our current vendor with the legacy system, let us know that they would not make the product obsolete in 2025, but would extend it to 2027. We had already put capital reserved for this initiative in 2021 through to 2025, but we did not determined that we would benefit from expertise to actually prepare the requirements document for the request for proposal in 2021, which is the project work plan as we move forward. This is a massive project that will take a lot of IT resources. It is change and transformational for the city, as the new systems actually are cloud-based, which reduces our overall cost of ownership over time, as well as the workflow is virtually paperless, so it contributes to efficiency and effectiveness. So a key project that we'd like to undertake in our original timeline. We are requesting through this recommendation that the Audit and Finance Committee recommend that Council approve reallocating $60,000 of the Enterprise Resource Planning Replacement or Upgrade project budget from 2022 to this year, 2021, in the upcoming final approval of the 2021-2025 financial plan.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lagan. Councillors Brown, Bonner, and Hemmens in order, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Ms. Lagan. As we do these type of projects, is there checks and balances we can put in place so we don't get in a situation where we have vendor lock-in and then are stuck with a particular, because all tech eventually becomes legacy tech and some of the formats can be problematic. So I'm just wondering, is there, as we go through this and spend this money, are we putting in measures that we won't find ourselves in a situation in the future where we are stuck with a certain technology because of the legacy decision of going with that vendor?
Absolutely. And what's shifted dramatically with this type of enterprise-wide application of software is it's gone from being a resource-intense IT staff initiative where releases and new versions have to be put in place to a cloud-based solution where it's literally pushed down to everyone's desktop when we do the upgrade. So they have effectively, the vendors have made it less costly for the organizations, and the new functionality is easier to access going forward. So there's probably 5 or 6 potential systems out there. They all compete on virtually the same concept, and we would ensure that our $3 to $5 million likely to put this in place is amortized over an appropriate time frame, which is usually 10 years. So it's advantageous to potentially lock in our agreement with a vendor over a longer period of time because our total cost of ownership on an annual subscription basis actually goes down, while giving us lots of opportunity, likely in year 7, to take advantage of any market leader that might give us greater benefit going forward. So through careful contracting, we will make sure that we do have exit clauses and we leave the options open for the city to move to other technology platforms. This is a base technology platform. We will still maintain many discrete applications that provide specialized functionality for the city, and so this is like the engine, but anything that interfaces and plugs and plays with our core system, we have a lot more flexibility. So really, this is a core decision, and the reason we're looking to bring some expertise in to make sure we get the requirements right. The requirements will be to replace existing functionality, but to look forward to increased efficiency and effectiveness of the city through recent functionality that we don't get from our legacy system that will be out there in the marketplace. So blunt answer is yes, we will make sure we contract for flexibility in the future.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. I've also had the same comment, like questions regarding these being locked into these things. I looked at the budgets for them, and I'm thinking from a point of view of someone who hires programmers on a regular basis to do these type of software development, you could literally hire 3 or 4 staff members, and they would design you up a system that would be specific to us, and we would tweak it whichever way we want. I don't know if that's ever been looked at. But it would, I think, in the long run, may save money. But then you have to worry about people getting hit by buses and that sort of thing, right? So, but I think I'm quite fine with. At this point, I'd like to move option 1, if I may. And the only other comment I have is I'm not a big person on acronyms. This has the highest concentration of acronyms in a report I've ever seen, so just to let you know. I don't know if the public understands what this is about, but I had trouble.
Seconded by Councillor Hemmens. And Councillor Hemmens, you wanted to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I support the motion. My read of this is that we're drawing early on some funds in order to make the process more efficient because it is a complex process. We've had some overruns in some of our bigger projects due to COVID. Would a file like this, because it is technology-based, would they be subject to potentially the same cost overruns as a result of COVID? And the reason I ask is because in here it says hiring a consultant to assist with the RFP process would be advantageous and may provide cost savings. So we don't know if we're actually going to recover those costs. So at the end of the project, we'll realistically have to find another $60 to finish, $60,000 to finish the project. But if we are anticipating a potential overrun like we've seen in other projects, we're going to have a larger amount to deal with there. So if you could just provide comment on that, please.
Certainly, through your worship, to Councillor Hemmons. That's a great question. At this point, it's very early days. It's a little bit stressful for me to have looked at this project as down to a dollar amount in such an early stage where we're basing it on 2017 research that we did in an RFI. And I'd like to caution Council that through this RFP process, we will get a much more solid number. The $3.2 million is an estimate at this point in time. These projects have to be managed with maximum rigor. They have historically been problematic for organizations. There is a very strong governance structure that's in place. We've been working on it for several months. Laura will be the project director. Ms. Mercer will be the project director. Mr. Rudolph will be the executive sponsor. I will be heavily involved as it's an IT deliverable, but it is a business initiative and it serves our city's internal operations to a large extent. We have determined in the process of preparing the charter that it will be an earned value analysis project as well, which is really critical in initiatives like this, which means at any point in time we will be able to gauge what percentage of the project is complete and what percentage of the budget has been spent. And that's something from a strategic oversight that Council should ask for as we move forward in the next couple of years. If you want to ask the most important question in an IT-related project, it is how much of the project is complete and how much of the budget have you spent? And that's one way to not get any surprises. Inevitably, there is something called scope creep or unavailability of resources due to COVID because of the acceleration of the acceptance of technology worldwide. We're going to see some stresses on our organization there, but we will manage it with rigor to avoid it as much as possible.
Thank you very much. If no further questions, all those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. The next is quarterly purchasing report, single and sole source purchases in excess of $250,000 and instances of non-compliance purchases. Ms. Legan again, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship and Council. I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Mercer, please.
Ms. Mercer.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is our Q4 purchasing report, and as you know, it outlines our sole and single source, our over $250,000 procurement, as well as any non-compliance. So we had 16 in Q4. We had 16 single or sole source purchases at just under $666,000, and we had two purchases over $250,000 that resulted in $1,065,000. And we had no non-compliant issues in that quarter. So for the year, we've had 60 single or sole source purchases at about $2.6 million. We've had 17 purchases over $250,000 at $18.2 million, and we have had no issues of non-compliance.
Thank you very much. Councillor Martman.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, just out of sheer curiosity, under the comments on the last page, it talks about complaint submissions were received. What are those and what do we do?
Sorry, I totally missed the question.
Ms. Mercer couldn't quite hear you. If you could articulate the question again, please.
So on the last page of the report, under the comment section, it talks about complaint submissions. One has 4 and one has 7. I'm wondering what those are or what we do with them.
They're compliant submissions. So there was 4 submissions that were compliant, and for the first one, and 7 that satisfied all of the requirements of the RFP or tender.
My apologies with my eyes and my new cataract.
No worries.
All is forgiven. If no further questions for Ms. Mercer or Ms. Legan, that was a report only. We have no other business. Motion for adjournment. Moved Councillor Brown, seconded Councillor Bonner. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, everyone.